Hello crafty friends, it's Jess from jesscrafts.com, and today I have a video for the latest Lawnscaping challenge as part of the Lawnscaping Facebook design inspiration team. And so it's challenge 112 to use embossing. You can use a variety of embossing paste, embossing folders, heat embossing, whatever suits your cart. And I decided to do a embossing folder with this wood grain background and combine it with the Party Animal stamp set. The card that I'm making today is going to be my dad's birthday card, and I'm going to try to keep it a little bit masculine, even though there's that super cutesy lawn fawn critter in there, because I wanted to use the deer, as he has this funny story about me as a child where when we moved into our new house in the woods, I was scared of deer, and because I didn't really know anything about them yet, and I had written like a little sign to the deer telling them to keep out. And so to kind of bring back that memory, I'm going to make a little deer on his card, and I'll use some of the other stamps as well. I embossed this on some craft cardstock, and I am adding some detail by using the distress ink. So I'm just picking two colors of brown distress ink. Whichever ones you have will work, but I generally recommend a lighter and a darker tone. So I went with frayed burlap and what I believe is walnut stain, which is one of the darkest of the distress browns. I wanted to get an overall coat of the lightest color on the entire embossed background because I really feel like the distress ink brings out that embossing, gives it more texture and more depth, and it's a way to add a lot of detail to a card without adding a lot of embellishment. And I think that that can work well on masculine cards where you don't want it always to be super simple and flat. You want that texture and dimension, but you know, or you feel like maybe, okay, well, I don't want to add as many embellishments. So just a suggestion here. And to get that really light coating, what I found was easier was to tap my distress foam tool onto the pad and then tap it off onto my craft sheet so that it wasn't quite as heavy and didn't leave those spots. I'm going to go a little bit slower today as I color this deer because I wanted to talk about something that I had recently been experimenting with to get higher contrast when coloring Copic images. I have seen quite a few people who use a much darker tone when they're doing their Copic coloring for their darkest color, and it gives a higher contrast, and I really like the way that that looks, but I was having trouble achieving it because I was doing a lot of the traditional, we'll use three colors that are next to each other. And so what I experimented with, and this is partly from my knowledge from the online card classes Copic class that Sandy Allnock did a lot of teaching with, is instead of just using, so I'm using E33, 35, 37. And if I want to get my darkest areas even darker and provide a higher contrast, then I should pick a marker that ends in the same number as my darkest marker, so that's the E37. So I need something else that ends in a 7 but has a higher first number. So in this case, I'm trying the E77. And so by going a lot higher up on that first number, the tones are still the same, the blending turned out pretty good, yet I was able to get a deeper shadow. And I experimented with this on a few different animals before I talked about it because I wanted to make sure if that generally was a good rule to try to match the second number of your darkest color. And it's generally worked for me, but of course you can experiment with the particular markers you have, and if maybe it's one number off like an E78, that might still have looked great. But just a little tip, I don't have a lot to offer in terms of Copic coloring. I am no expert, but just little thought I had. When I add the shadows, I keep it really, really simple. I only color in drop shadows. I don't worry about a light source because particularly on a lot of my cards, there really is no light source. It's not an actual scene. There is no sunlight on the card. And so I am just adding the shadows, or they're called drop shadows, where two objects meet, like where his hands are sitting on his belly would cause a little drop shadow. And for the belly and the face, I went down a little bit in the E markers, and I'm using E33 and 31. For these smaller areas, I didn't try that tip of going really dark to get that contrast in there, and I just used those two. And I'm also going to be coloring the balloons and the cakes with some teal markers because I thought that the teal would contrast nicely with the brown, so I'll be using BG 72 and 78 to color in that cake and to color in the balloon. And for the balloon, I just generally recommend to put the shadow on one side of the balloon, and that gives it enough interest and enough to look like a balloon, but of course adding some glossy accents would give a really fun effect to the balloon as well. For a second kind of embossing, I decided to do some gold heat embossing for my sentiment and also for my card mat. I think this is another way to add shine, but again, to kind of keep it a little bit more masculine. Like, you might not want to use glitter on a masculine card. I mean, all those are kind of stereotypes. You can do whatever you want. And if a guy loves glitter, great. But, you know, just as a general tip, using gold heat embossing is a great way to add some sparkle without being as girly per se. But, you know, like I said, that's all kind of stereotypical. But so I am going to stamp this happy birthday sentiment from the set. 'Cause like I said, it's just going to be a birthday card. Keep it simple. I like that the happy birthday is just about as wide as the card. And so it really is going to act as a grounding piece, and I'm going to have that deer slightly touching it, so it's almost like that's the ground that he's standing on. I wanted to tie in the gold in another place too, though, so it wasn't just one little bit of gold. So I decided to make a gold mat. And rather than using a whole sheet of glitter paper or gold foil paper, which is hard to come by, I'm kind of making my own little gold foiled effect here by just again using that gold embossing powder. I took my Versamark pad and I rubbed it on 3 of the edges. Rubbing it on all 4 edges is a little bit tricky because you kind of still have to be able to hold and manipulate the card. So I did 3 edges at a time. And then I have to go back and add that last edge. But if you put Versamark over the previously gold embossed spots, it's going to cause a second layer of embossing powder and make them slightly thicker. So when you put it on, try to only touch the areas that had no gold embossing yet. If you get a little overlap, it's fine. You won't really notice it because it's just a mat. But a little tip there. And also, the embossing powder will still be wet for a while, so if you turn it over to try to kind of compensate for some of that warping, it could stick to your mat. So you might want to just let it cool for a minute and then heat the backside to prevent some of that warping. Part of the reason mine's warping is because it happens to be really thin craft cardstock that, you know, I got on sale one time. Turns out it wasn't perfect, but I'm going to use it anyway until it's gone. And I might invest in a thicker craft cardstock in the future. So I placed my sentiment down, trimmed off the edges, and then I'm going to have it on top of that gold mat, just again to bring attention and interest. And then I'm going to start attaching all of my little pieces. I decide to pop up the deer on some foam tape, but I am going to use multimedia matte to glue down the other accessories that go with it. Part of the reason to use multimedia matte is because it is a super strong adhesive, but glossy accents would work really well too. The only thing is if you do get a little bit of kind of like, I don't know the best word for it, but like splooging outside, you'll see that glossy accent glue, whereas the multimedia dries matte. And once I had that down, I didn't really like the way that that curl on the balloon was kind of coming out of the deer. That was a little distracting, so I just trimmed it up and it just looks like the balloon is hanging straight down behind him. And so that's it for my card today. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're interested in more crafting tutorials featuring Lawn Fawn, Distress Inks, Newton's Nook, all those good things, please subscribe to my channel. And I'm going to leave you a link to the challenge in the video description below so you can check us out and participate in the embossing challenge. Thanks for watching. Bye.